Let it snow. It's not snowing. It's not going to be a white Christmas in Michigan. It is going to be this week on the couch. We'll talk about whether it's a mistake to bench your first round pick in the fantasy semis. Alan Seslowsky, RotoWire. Is it a mistake? And the thing is, there's more than one player this could apply to this week. Is it a mistake to bench your first round pick in the fantasy semis?
First of all, anyone listening on the audio, it needs to check out the video. You look very angelic in this like white background.
The void. Someone said I'm in the void.
Yeah, you look like Obi-Wan
Kenobi from the void.
Yeah, you look like Obi-Wan Kenobi after, he was struck down and now you're giving wisdom to people. I mean, it looks great. But no, I mean, what if your first round pick was Saquon Barkley and you have Kyren Williams that you picked up? I mean, that's like the most extreme case, right? It's the same thing in the real NFL drafts. After the guys are drafted, draft capital means something, but it's not going to drive your decision. What you see on the field, what the coaches see in practice, what we see through the first 3 months of our season, that's going to drive our decision. At this point, I think that most fantasy players are not novice. Even if you're new to fantasy, there's so much information out there that start your studs is basically get off my lawn grandpa advice.
You're right. Well, are they studs at this point? And I think we can get into some particulars. Let's put this to the test because, like I said, this can apply to more than one player. We can get into analysis, and matchups become so much bigger now that we're in the fantasy playoffs. So I want to use as a meridian, and you can choose to interject another player as the meridian because Kyren Williams is too easy, right?
Well, that was the extreme case. Yeah, that was the extreme case.
Let's bring enter stage left Devin Singletary in as a good meridian, okay? Also because depending on your views on momentum or lack thereof, Devin Singletary has a lot of momentum going into this week. Probably won't have CJ Stroud. All right, so let's put these two side by side. Austin Eckler, Devin Singletary.
These are the perfect guys to do it, right? I mean, Devin Singletary has the production and the stat line that we thought Austin Eckler was going to have. These guys have switched bodies and souls and jerseys, right? They're two guys going in the opposite direction now. If you say in a keeper dynasty format and you traded away for Austin Eckler thinking that he was going to bounce back, you're probably going to be more apt to start him. But if you're looking at these two guys and where they're going, and to me, it's do not start Austin Eckler. In fact, I heard Austin Eckler. I know he does the fantasy football podcast with Matt Harmon. He sounded like a broken man a little bit. You can hear it in the voice. Now, obviously, Austin Eckler is going to come back. He's a warrior, and I'm looking forward to where he ends up next year. But right now, and that team feels like it's broken, right? I mean, Easton Stick is the quarterback. The coach is fired. A lot of times we talk about Sig that we get like that dead cat bounce, new coach, but this just seems like, man, these guys are just limping to the finish line right here. Devin Singletary, that would be an easy call for me. I think Devin Singletary is probably a top 10, top 12 back. You can persuade me to do it higher. So great examples. Do not start your quote studs, your first round pick.
Yeah, I think with Eckler's probably the easiest. I started with Eckler, Alan, because I think he's the easiest. And just going a little further down that conversation about the Chargers, I think part of the problem is, Alan, they're going to have a home, I'm making air quotes, game. It's going to be full of Bills fans. Yeah. So there's nothing to feed off of. There's no core of fans, even teams that are long suffering. Jets fans, there's still some core fans to draw some energy from, to play for pride. I just don't think the Chargers have that. And like you said, Austin Eckler, we're all looking forward to next year. And there's two elements to this, right? There's one element of how much do you trust your first round pick? And the other element is how afraid are you of missing what they're going to do? And Austin Eckler, there's nothing to fear here.
Yeah.
And like I said, we may come up with another meridian back. It could be
Derrick Henry.
Chandler. Well, Derrick Henry. Okay, so let's talk about Derrick Henry. Go ahead, because you brought him up. So Derrick Henry, I'm putting my finger in the camera because I'm on my laptop. Derrick Henry, the visuals are great. Come on over to YouTube. You do fear putting him on the bench, right? Like every single one of us, whether it's a draft or a lineup, has made the mistake of not respecting Derrick Henry, and we're afraid of making it again. Or am I getting too emotional about this?
No, no, I couldn't put Derrick Henry on there. It's because it's all depending on the game script, right? Like Derrick Henry, we haven't really seen like a major cliff drop, right? I think with Austin Eckler, you're starting to see signs of, man, it just doesn't look like it used to. Whereas Derrick Henry, it's been so gradual. Sure, he's not what he was 3 years ago, but it doesn't look that bad. It's more of the team context. And now with presumably Ryan Tannehill going to be the starter if indeed Will Levis can't go, I think that helps Derrick Henry. And we still believe no one ever says, oh, the Titans are tanking, right? You just never hear that. You always hear,
No.
you've even heard like them say it about the Patriots, which we know in football, it's almost impossible to tank. Like, I'm sure there's some rare exceptions. It's not like the NBA, but I don't think that applies for Derrick Henry. So yeah, you have all these like guys that you took in the top 24 picks, the top 12 running backs, and you're going to have to make some tough decisions. And it's just so interesting. You go down the line because, by the way, we did like a mock draft for next year.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people are going to have similar players that they want in the top 24, but man, does it get ugly for running back quick. And I think that is connected to how this year has been playing out. Sig.
Yeah, we're looking at Alan. We're looking at Rachaad White's a second-round pick next year.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. We had him somewhere between 18 and 20.
Kyron Williams,
first-round pick.
Right. James Cook, I think, is a first-round pick at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he'd have to probably do it a couple more times. I think that anytime you have like the running quarterback situation, it's automatically a committee of two. And then if you add a credible another back, I don't think Latavius Murray, like what if they get Deontay Foreman? I'm just making up names here,
Sure, that's fair. But I do think that assuming Joe Brady's going to return, you have to love what James Cook can do. Jahmyr Gibbs, a first-round pick next year. It's slam dunk.
Yeah, well, you'll see there's a big 7 in the exercise we did. I'm sure you could just quickly, that includes A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Mm-hmm. After that, pick 8 and pick 18, it might as well be the same pick.
Right.
So you could have Travis Etienne at pick 10, or you could have him at pick 16, depending on your flavor. So I don't know if and again, things change, but Sigmund Bloom, you're going to be doing best ball in like 60 days from now, maybe less. Sure. So this stuff actually matters. And that's what we're starting to get questions about. Hey, where's the 2024 rankings? I'm out of my playoffs already.
Right. And unlike this year, I don't think there's much help coming in the cavalry in terms of the draft. I don't think we're going to love the rookie running backs this year. But let's get back, and this is exactly the way to look at when you've been doing rankings every week. This just emerges when you see how quickly the drop-off comes at running back, and that's why we have some of these hard questions. So Derrick Henry or Devin Singletary?
It would be tough for me to bench Derrick Henry, but I would understand if someone said, this is how I would answer that question on like social media. I would say, I would play Derrick Henry, but I understand if you don't.
Yeah.
It's such a cop-out, but that's the truth.
Well, no, and what I like to say, my cop-out is, and if people parse my words very, very carefully, because I choose my words carefully, I always say, I won't talk you out of the other option. So I would pick this option. So I would put Henry in, but I won't talk you out of Devin Singletary. And complicating the Singletary side, just to pause on that for a moment, he is playing Cleveland. And we're back to the stifling, suffocating Cleveland defense, and it's going to be Case Keenum at quarterback. So it'd be very easy when we look back on this is that Devin Singletary, and maybe I should pick another Meridian running back.
Like Zach Moss if he's healthy, right? Someone like that. Jerome Ford.
Well, yeah, but even I think Jerome Ford, these are pretty easy, right? I mean, maybe Javonte Williams, if you like Javonte Williams this week because they're playing New England. Travis Etienne's an interesting one because what exactly is Travis Etienne? Now, Travis Etienne feels like the 12 to 15 points in the bank, but not a lot. But he doesn't give you the chance of the 25-point game, not the way that he's been playing. Devin Achane could be an interesting name to bring up here. Breece Hall, Gus Bus after San Francisco had trouble stopping the run. But these are all players that it's much more difficult. At least Devin Singletary just last week had a performance that you would have been really sad to leave on your bench, right? So that's where the emotional parts of it come in. But I think you're right that Derrick Henry is one of those ones that, because of the history, because of how often we've been burned by disrespecting him, we say not now, not today, not this week, but it may end up being the right move when all the chips settle. I mean, I guess since I mentioned Brees Hall, and you got roots deep there in the Jets psyche, the Jets mass psyche. I mean, what do we do here? We're not going to see Zach Wilson. Is that good or bad? The last time, the only time the Jets offense looked good, just a couple weeks ago against the Texans, it was with Zach Wilson. And then we're back to Zach Wilson's nightmare. And you have Trevor Siemian. And Trevor Siemian, if anything, is showing us how it came to be that the team was so reluctant to play Trevor Siemian, right? And you have two separate questions here. And we can, and it's almost the inverse of Devin Singletary, because you might say, hey, and Noah Brown also, we can bring him up later. It might just be that no Texan was a good play. Wouldn't even matter if Nico Collins is healthy,
Right.
because it's the Cleveland Browns. It's also possible, Alan, and this gets into your theories of how much matchup matters, that it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. It could be a jugs machine that you just point at Garrett Wilson. It's Washington. So you have the matchup quality. And then I think Brees Hall becomes a little more interesting, because at least Trevor Siemian can do a good captain check down impression. So what say you this week about the Jets, quote unquote, studs?
The 32nd ranked offense against the 32nd ranked defense, man. This is going to be fun, right? Let's see what dominates in the NFL right here. Given the matchup, I'm playing those guys, right? I mean, I'm not going to worry. Trevor Siemian being there makes it a Brees Hall game, and Garrett Wilson showed that he's QB proof, right? He'll survive in an ocean with just like a piece of wood, right? Like in Titanic. Like he's not sinking, and it makes you think like next year are we going to
quarterback? Yeah.
Right. I mean, if they had like a C- at quarterback, a B at quarterback, he would be that 1,700-yard player. I'm playing Garrett Wilson where I have now. Obviously, if you have a better option, we can go down the list. That's fine. Everything. If you're in a two receiver league, sure. I get some of these questions where these people have built such good teams. It's so hard to pick, but in the leagues where, again, that they're becoming a little bit deeper now, and there's so many people are adding a flex, adding a wide receiver. How can you not play Garrett Wilson? It's going to be pretty safe. If you're playing like Terry McLaurin, for example, who had a big week last week, right? There's been a lot of zeros there, or, something close to single digit points. So I'm still going with Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall. Man, are you going to play Zamir White over him if he gets another start? I mean, I'm still playing Brees Hall. And again, I am matchup sensitive, Sig, when you're talking about the margins. Maybe not in the big part of the bell curve, but at the 32nd defense, I'm going to take my chances with the players that I believe in their talent.
Yeah, and that's it. You're putting a chip on Garrett Wilson's talent. I'm just going through my refactoring. I do my initial projections and then I refactor them. I have Garrett Wilson wide receiver 25 on first pass. I think that may be closer to wide receiver 20 when I look at it in context, Alan. But some of the names I have around him are guys like Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf, Jordan Addison. So I think that you're right. In a 2 wide receiver league with no flex, that's about the only scenario where you might not be playing Garrett Wilson. And Brees Hall, the only hesitation I have about Brees Hall is that the team seems to be more interested in seeing Izzy Abanikanda, if I'm saying that right, hit back. And you just never know, because the Jets are basically a ghost ship at this point. I don't even know if Robert Saleh has a sense of whether he's going to have a job next year, whether the team has a sense of that. The team still plays with pride every week, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So, but like if it was Brees Hall or Austin Eckler.
Oh, man. Yeah, I would say still Brees Hall. Again, and I'm not saying with like any confidence. I'm just saying like at least Brees Hall is on the mend, right? Like he had the devastating injury in week 7 last year. We know it's about 10 months to return to play, 18 months to get to their quote full self, and full self is never even 100% that following year. So he's on the upward trajectory, and it's really just team context. I mean, both of these, it's a coin flip. I'm just saying, like, I'm looking at my rankings, and again, my rankings aren't the Bible by any means here, but I still have Brees Hall inside the top 10, man. I have him like right around 9. And you're talking about Austin Eckler. I mean, I'd rather play Zeke than Austin Eckler at this point.
Yeah, well, that's easy. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, look, I'm playing any running back that I know. I'm playing Chuba Hubbard over Austin Eckler. If I know a running back's going to get 18 touches, or at least is going to get 80%, 90% of his backfield's touches in Zeke's case, that's enough for me to talk myself out of Austin Eckler. Does that apply? Now, where are we? You want to talk about a roller coaster ride? That has been Saquon Barkley in the second half of the year. And we have seen everything from we're going to feature him in the passing game, and he's going to have an absolute outstanding game for fantasy just as a receiver. The last time we saw him, he was on the sidelines for Matt Breida on passing downs. We've seen Tommy DeVito look like he can be one of the most fun stories, including for fantasy, by revitalizing this offense. We've seen him shrink last week in the Superdome, playing a familiar Philadelphia opponent. So that throws a monkey wrench into things. And again, if we're looking at this as a matchup, here's an Eagles team that is probably just now admitting to themselves, Alan, yeah, our defense isn't the same without Jonathan Gannon. Coordinators matter, right? And they make the change to Matt Patricia. I don't know whether you would call the change a success or a failure. I mean, they were facing Drew Lock and they lost. So there's a lot of layers to this where you can use these pieces to talk yourself into Saquon Barkley. And one of the easiest ways, I think, to talk yourself into Saquon Barkley this week is he is a warrior, right? I mean, he's a dude that's going to lay it out there. When he was saying before the season, like, I just want to play for my team. I just want to give what I've got for my team. I'm paraphrasing when all the contract stuff was going on. And he showed that out on the field this year, I think. He showed that it doesn't matter the record, doesn't matter the press coverage, the quarterback, his prospects for future earnings being affected. He's going to give everything he has. But last week, that wasn't very much.
Yeah. Cross sport reference here. He reminds me of peak Damian Lillard, right? Just a team that was just getting, disappointing, but was the star, wanted to get out there, never wanted to tank and just, play hard. Barkley, though, the thing that seems to be a mystery, I'm hoping you can answer this for me with Barkley, is that when he redid that contract and they took him off the franchise tag, did he agree to not be franchise tagged again? Because he didn't really get that much more money. He got like another, I mean, it was less than $1 million or right around there, but you would have to think that the leverage was, you can't tag me again next year. I get to go into the open market. I haven't been able to get that question answered specifically. And then that leads into the next question is that, yes, you're probably going to start him unless you have better options. I mean, you start getting into the Barkley or like Jonathan Taylor if he plays, Barkley or DeAndre Swift, who's, had a little bit of is a little bit of a colder run than we thought. But I'm just so interested where Saquon Barkley might end up next year, because we were talking a little bit like earlier, rewind the tape, first round picks. I mean, it may sound crazy, but is Barkley back in the first round if he lands in a spot that we like? So all those questions. And can you shed any light about Barkley's status for next year? Do they have the power to hit him again?
They do. So they can tag him again just for 120% of what he made this year. So we'll see. Probably inside in the third year of the Dable Shane regime, they should be thinking about the playoffs, including after winning the first year in the playoffs, getting to the playoffs and winning a game. So they'll probably keep him. But I think that some of the names you talked about, I mean, I'm probably putting Barkley in over Swift. I'm putting Barkley in. I could easily I'm probably putting Barkley in over Eckler. Barkley versus Henry's tough.
Walker, how about Kem Walker, who just basically helped you advance?
I'm not putting Walker on the bench. Walker, I think, is a top 10 back this week. I'll probably put Barkley in over Hall, but that, I mean, man, just ask me again in 5 minutes, I could change my answer there.
Walker's got the tough matchup, Sig. It's Tennessee,
yeah, but they're going to give him the ball 30 times. The good news is Tennessee's not going to run away from Seattle. He's going to get as much work as he can handle. And I just feel like Walker's one of those guys that can go for 20 yards on his first 20 carries and then break an 80-yarder in the fourth quarter. I just know that, especially feeling that, and look, this isn't a moment for me to say it's okay to let your emotions guide you, because it's part of your intuition, emotional intelligence, and there is something in there from your experience that's trying to inform you when you're about to click the check mark and something says, like that one time I bet money on a Brian Hoyer-led team in the playoffs. I should have listened to that thing. Said, what? You never bet on Brian Hoyer. You bet against Brian Hoyer. What are you thinking? But there's something in there. There's something to unpack in there. I mean, Barkley is a tough guy to bench. Now, that being said, just to give folks a data point, I'm in a league where you can start up to 3 tight ends, and tight end scoring is souped up, not just 0.5 per reception, but yardage is souped up.
First
To where,
downs.
so I'm actually starting like Jake Ferguson over Barkley, but he's been outscoring him anyway. And yes, I'm Jake Ferguson, my 3rd tight end. Kyle Pitts is on my bench. I tried to corner the market on tight end, see what I got for that, but somehow I made it back to the playoffs. So I am actually benching Barkley in one of those leagues because of that lack of that floor. You can see just how low his floor is.
Hey, Sig, we're talking about
Yep.
mistakes today, right?
Yeah.
I'll be very brief. I have an anecdote, and again, everyone has those stories where, I should have started Curtis Samuel and I would have won my matchup. Like, okay, but you chose not to start Curtis Samuel. I have a tale of a man that's in too many leagues, Sigmund Bloom. I was waiting. I had Josh Jacobs in my lineup, and some of the softwares, they don't let you take out the player until you have a legal roster. And I'm in one of these dynasty leagues where I don't want to drop anybody, so I'm waiting last Thursday for Jacobs to his status to turn to out, so I can put him on my bench. I mean, in my IR spot, and then put Devin Singletary in. Of course, someone with 40 leagues forgets to do that. I leave Josh Jacobs in there. I'm up by, quote, 80% the projection. And of course, you know how this story ends, right? Just like every good gambling story. First I was up, and then I lost it all, right? I mean, that is an unforced mistake. So again, we're talking about mistakes. Sure. No one feels bad for me, especially the guy who beat me. But man, can you tell that we're on the couch, man? I needed to get that out. I needed to get it out.
I'm still haunted. I'm haunted. Like, one of my dying words might be, Mike Boone in week 16 was still a good process play, and he had a 100-yard game in week 7. It's haunts you. It stays with you. And certainly so I'll give you my version of this since we're on the couch, Alan. So I will have those unforced errors during the season, and it might be something that's an unforced error, like I wasn't circumspect. In one of my leagues, I won't say which one because I don't want to get myself in too much trouble. I've already had to have 2 warnings where other people in the league think I'm tanking. Like, no, it's just because, tending to my teams is the last thing that I do. But I think that when you have something happen like that, and then I'll lose a matchup by like 2 or 3 points, like why didn't I swap out the defenses when I knew this was a better play? I didn't go back and check. And then I look and I think that's what's going to keep me from getting a first round bye, and then I'm going to lose in the first round of the playoffs because of it. Or that's what's going to keep me from getting to the playoffs, or something like that, that I feel like my brain is always trying to put together a grand karmic story that somehow my fantasy teams won or lost. Because in some ways, it's still comforting when your team lost because of you, because it feels like you're still the main influence. And unfortunately, fantasy football shows us year in, year out that we're probably not as big of influence as we want to think we are as the manager of the team. But we were having a good discussion about this behind the scenes, football guys, that whether randomness is good or bad for us. And we take it on the chin when randomness introduces unforeseeable outcomes, especially when there's a hyper focus like there is in the fantasy playoffs. But I think there's a good argument out there, and there's a big USA Today article about the growth of fantasy football. Matthew Berry said it makes such a great feeling when you do hit it because of the randomness, or randomness makes you feel like you're always in it, or randomness just makes you more on the edge of your seat for the outcome. I know this has been, at least anecdotally again, it feels like one of the most random seasons we've had. So how's randomness affecting you and your perception of yourself?
Well, randomness is what makes this the largest and most popular fantasy sport. There is an element of skill to it, but the mere fact that, like, my 80-year-old aunt plays in a league and they know, they don't know roster construction or week 17 correlation,
right.
or
0 running back.
No, they're exactly. The first round is all like the 5 most popular players in the league. Right. But the fact that they could play this game, they could not play fantasy baseball. Right. Because it's that's poker. This is a little bit more slot machine meets blackjack. Fantasy football. There is an edge if you follow the book, if you follow the process, but ultimately you never know what the dealer has. You don't know if it's a 6, or if he's showing a 6, you don't know if it's a 4 or a 10 under there. So I think it's the correct amount of there's different, as you call them, there's different sophistications of leagues, right? There's
Mhm.
different you're catering to all different depths. So I like the randomness, and when it bites me, I don't mind as much. I used to, but now doing this for 15, 20 years as far as playing, I accept it as part of the game.
Yeah, I think we have to accept it. We have to. And I think it's good to, especially from where we sit, to acknowledge it and call it out as a part of the story and not pretend that it's not, even though it makes us seem like, well, the charlatans that we are, right? The fake fortune tellers that we are. Okay, there's still a couple more running back names we should just emote about while we're together here on the couch, Alan. Um, and wow, I think I tweeted out at some point earlier this year, is there any rivalry in sports better than Arthur Smith and fantasy football players, right? Every week there's a new twist. The latest twist, and this really might have been the coup de grace for his coaching tenure there, is that it was the rain, and it was at Carolina. I don't know. Statistically, they're tough on the pass. I don't know if that means they have a good pass defense, but still, Bijan Robinson. We knew the passing game wasn't going to do much against Carolina, but Bijan Robinson, not only was he used less than Tyler Algier, touched the ball less, but if you just watch the game, and like you said, forget about the draft status, you would say that's how it should have went. He was not playing well, and in the fourth quarter, we did not see much of him. So Bijan Robinson, more than anybody else on this list, could be one that you watch the first quarter of the game. Now you can tell yourself, Arthur Smith also has had these strange epiphanies or moments of clarity where he does go back to Bijan Robinson and give him 20 plus touches. He does use Kyle Pitts more right out of the gate to influence the game, and maybe being humbled again by the football gods will, and having an actual competent quarterback will make a rebound week for this offense. So we could really talk ourselves in circles about Bijan Robinson. What's the bottom line advice?
Yeah, I'm just curious, and I will answer that question directly. But
Yeah.
if you could choose one of the two things that would be good for fantasy for 2024 with the Atlanta Falcons, would you give them like a quarterback we really like say Justin Fields, or would you keep them with Desmond Ridder and give them a coach we like? Which one do you think is better for fantasy football?
Wow.
You can only pick one.
Yeah.
Stumped you a little bit, huh?
Well, because so let me unpack what's spinning in my brain as you pose that question. Is that the question at the heart of this is, who has more influence on how the game actually unfolds, the quarterback or the play designer and play caller? And I think there's a lot of examples we would want to point to, like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, and just to say, well, if the quarterback is above a certain line, now Justin Fields is not necessarily above that line. I keep coming back to now the kind of things that really fascinate me. I mean, we can talk fantasy football and fantasy football decisions. We're like, what are the Bears going to do, and what are the Cardinals going to do this offseason about their quarterbacks? And they're going to play this weekend, by the way. So I would say, like, really, if I had to pick one button or the other and get on with it, since we're only doing an hour-long show here, I would probably say a new quarterback, because I have no faith in Desmond Ridder at this point, or at least no faith for him to be reliable week to week. Maybe an opponent like Tampa Bay or certain play calls dialed up at the right time work. And at least with Arthur Smith, we saw him elevate the Titans offense. But the troubling thing about Arthur Smith is that he seems to be in a chess game against himself, and we're the losers, that he wants to over clever everything and have his fingerprints on the success of the team instead of the players. And will that go away if he gets a Justin Fields? You know who he needs to get. This is the quarterback, right? I'll give it. So here's the ding, ding, ding answer. If they get Kirk Cousins,
he's an Achilles, though. I mean, he probably won't be himself till week 7. So we're still going to be dealing with this for a month and a half. It seems like yes, someone like Kirk Cousins Sure. Andy Dalton would be like the minimal. We're still using Andy Dalton 12 years later as like the Mendoza line, right?
Well,
Like,
Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco. Hey,
right.
look, let me interject here for a second and say, if you aren't convinced that the quarterback position is a spiritual, mental, emotional position first and foremost, and not a physical position, it is how Joe Flacco and Andy Dalton, their skills, their ability to help a team has not dropped off a cliff. In fact, when the league wants to talk themselves into something else, the grass is greener on the other side. How many teams' seasons could Joe Flacco have saved? He could have saved the Jets season. I think he actually invited them to have him save their season. Andy Dalton, we can look back at I think Kirk Cousins is going to have this kind of career arc. Derek Carr might have this kind of career arc. Jimmy Garoppolo has it if he wants
Gardner
it.
Minshew is the higher end of that.
Yeah. And then you have these guys. What's fascinating to me is watching some of these guys like Jake Browning, even Tommy DeVito and Tyson Bagent. You got to look at Tyson DeVito. I'm mashing them into one guy. Tommy DeVito and Tyson Bagent. It's not what they've done in the rookie years. It's what they've done in the rookie years as an undrafted free agent and what that portends if they can actually develop. So I think that there's a lot of different layers here where, because let's face it, backup quarterback is the best job in sports, right? It has to be the best job in sports.
Do you remember
reliever? I don't know.
Yeah. Do you remember there's a famous story out there of Doug Peterson, the coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who was the perennial backup for Brett Favre. And Brett Favre famously was like Nolan Ryan. The guy like never missed a game, right?
Right.
And they used to have to overpay their backup because who the heck wants to go live in Green Bay for a year, right?
Sure.
And even knowing you're never going to get a chance to play. So it's basically the best position in sports. And then, but this year we've seen that, hey, if you're a backup quarterback, you better be ready to play with the first offense, right? It's unprecedented. But I want to go back to the beginning, what you asked me here about
Bijan,
Arthur. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And specifically Arthur Smith. It's amazing how like, I was one of the people saying like Arthur Smith, coach of the year odds look really good, right? I mean, that was a thing that people talked about and you weren't laughed off the face of the earth. And some guys, Sigmund Bloom, are just better as number twos, right? Not everyone can be the CEO. Someone's got to be the Ed McMahon, the second banana, right? The second banana is a skill. And once you might be really good at this job as offensive coordinator, but once you're elevated to the head coach and you're in charge of the whole operation, sometimes that's not what your particular skill set is. Now, this thing with Arthur Smith is just beyond, because I don't think it takes like someone with like a high football acumen or experience to realize you take three guys within the top 10 and then you barely use them. It just defies logic, right? Like this, there's no way to explain not having, Drake London have 14 targets a game or have Kyle Pitts 10 targets a game, especially since there's no wide receiver 2 on the team. And with Bijan Robinson, I mean, especially with a running back, right? Like it's almost considered reaching or taking a running back high if you take him in the first 5 picks of the second round. You're going to take him with a top 10 pick and pass on a blue chip player. That guy better be LaDainian Tomlinson at this point.
Right. So this gets into, of course, the assumption of rational coaching, because we've seen that we can't count on that from Arthur Smith. Poor Terry Fontenot. But what do we do with Bijan Robinson? I did my first stab at rankings is just doing the projections for each player in each game. And I don't know how the rankings are going to unfold. And I gave Bijan Robinson my honest estimate of his stats against Indy this week. And then I looked at the way the rankings unfolded, Alan, and I said, wow, that's low. Like I'm basically telling people to bench Bijan Robinson. And then I go through and refactor and say, well, should I be moving him up? I artificially juke the numbers a little bit, but my heart's not in it. Is your heart in starting Bijan Robinson this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put him back in there as a top 10er. I mean, there was so much blowback. Like these guys hear what happens in the media. Like you cannot ignore. People were like, "Oh my God, Bijan, how could you not?" And it's not like they won or score. They didn't even score really, right? So when things go tremendously wrong, it's easy to see the case for them reversing course. I mean, who knows? Like you said, you could say rainy game, weird, mucky game. And he didn't really fumble the ball or have a bad game until like the late in the game anyway. So it's not like he had that weird thing when it's so weird. A running back will fumble and they'll go to like coach jail. But if a quarterback like gets stripped, he doesn't have that penalty. Or if a wide receiver on
Right.
yards after the catch, if they fumble, they get right back in there and have their regular snaps. It only happens to running backs. It's the weirdest thing, Sig.
It is. Well, that's you want to get into some psychological pet peeves. I don't understand. This gets there's so much of football that can overlap with parenting or coaching that overlaps with parenting, but I don't understand benching a player because they fumble. Now, if you have a player that's been repeatedly fumbling and you've been working on ball security and you've emphasized it and you've tried carrying the ball around the facility all week and you've tried the sports psychologist and you've tried all these things, then maybe it's time to save the player from themselves, because if they keep fumbling, they might have a fatal loss of confidence. But this sporadic benching a player because they fumble, all you're doing is actually making it more likely that they're going to have some mental hitch about it. That's actually what's going to do it, is because you're punishing them and making them feel like every carry their playing time is at stake anyway.
No, you're right. The idea is when someone makes a mistake is to throw them back in there. I referee high school basketball, right? That's
Okay.
like kind of like a little side thing I do. And if I get into a game and I have to administer like a technical foul because a coach is horrible sportsmanship yelling at us,
right,
and it's a hostile environment and they call and complain about it, the next thing that my assigner does is send me back to that gym the next night. He's like, you're going back into that fire. You're not, because if he says, nah, the guys complained about you, you can't go back there, I would lose all my confidence. So this is exactly what you just said. Someone makes a critical mistake that potentially costs you the game. No, this is what happens. You made a mistake. We still believe in you. Get in there.
Yeah. Wow. Part of me wants to do like a whole hour now on just being a high school basketball referee, because there's some perspective there. You should write the book from that perspective about Americans and American behavior.
I want to do content. I am going to start doing content on referee content, like bringing my, at some point that's like in the brain of, of things I want to do.
It's the most thankless job too, because so look,
have you done it? You sound like you've done it.
No, I've never done it, but
coach though. You've coached baseball.
Yes. And let me tell you, and only I think by having children and raising children and getting into like the whole child rearing industrial complex does this become clear, Alan. Bless the heart of anybody who has to work with parents. Oh my. You want to talk about assumption of rational. With parents, there's no assumption of rational nothing. The parenting is going to rot people's brains when it comes to their kids, and you're not going to get a rational actor when you're interacting with them. So then on top of that, you add in the way that people get emotionally invested in these competitions, which implicates their emotional investment in their raising of their kid. Often, I'm getting Freudian, we're on the couch here, has to do with themselves and their unfulfilled dreams or their views of themselves. And they're often acting out things towards their children that are really directed back at themselves. So if you're literally playing referee in one of those situations,
it's sick.
Who knows? Who knows what you might encounter?
Well, being a referee, Sigmund Bloom, you know sports. I could teach you in 10 seconds. You know what a foul is. You know how to call a foul. But what refereeing is communicating and managing people. You just nailed it. The best referees, they don't necessarily have the best mechanics or the best, play call. I mean, but it's the best communicators and arbiter of conflict. I mean, that you just nailed it. It's parenting 101 for adults. And I love that you said that these parents are projecting their own, I would say, insecurities into their children, and it manifests in these vicious, ugly, harassing of, I mean, again, I don't mind that. I kind of like it, not like it, but I'm there. It's my adrenaline rush.
You
it's my
step
escape.
up and you say, I want to get into that fire. I'm going to put it out.
Yeah. It's cool.
No,
it's cool.
Well, yeah, because like you've talked about, like you already said, like you understand how to preserve your own psyche, because there will be people that will come at you, will straight up come at you and try to, on a real primal level. I've watched it happen with youth sports, 9 and 10-year-olds.
It's worse.
They will try to really get an official to like back down and kowtow to them in a scene that is really, really tough. But see, we're down the rabbit hole.
We're deep.
Well, no, but this is it. See, every time these conversations happen, I think this is the stuff that people actually want on a podcast. We do the fantasy football handshake, and I'm glad we always get the last 10 minutes, but I want to get at least a few more minutes real quick. I want to talk about quarterbacks, okay? Because there are a few quarterbacks we need to at least take our temperature on, of whether we're talking ourselves in or out of these guys, right? And we didn't touch Tony Pollard yet either. We didn't touch on him as a running back we're not sure about. So let's throw Dak and Pollard together against Miami. And I think that you can look at this a couple of ways that might make you feel a little bit reluctant about Dallas. They are a terrible road team. I don't know what it is. They're a terrible, terrible road team. They barely beat the Chargers. They got thumped by the Cardinals. They got thumped by the 49ers. They got thumped by Buffalo. They are not a good road team. They're playing in Miami. And the second is Vic Fangio and the defense they're going to try to put the banana in the tailpipe of this offense. And you're talking about Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer, who seem to be so brilliant, but maybe they're only brilliant when the talent of the Cowboys just overwhelms the opponent. So you get this far, man, I can see a lot of teams that have Dak as a bye team. They didn't even have to absorb his bad game last week. And we can get into some specific names, and we can talk about Tony Pollard too. But where we are on this Cowboys offense that looked like the key to winning your title and maybe avoiding them is the key to winning your title.
It's funny because you talked about if you were Dak, you better have had a bye because you didn't make it through, especially in a super flex league, right? Where quarterback scoring really matters, right? I mean, that 7-point game, you better hope you didn't go against Jake Browning or Easton Stick last week. You lose, right? Unless you have Christian McCaffrey too. But I think that this is a good spot for the Cowboys in the sense where, like, look, you're looking at a high total. The number's like 51 plus.
Right.
And presumably if Tyreek Hill's back, this is going to be first one to 32 wins, right? There's going to have to be some points scored there. So yes, everything you said about road Dallas, road Dak, but I like the rebound spot for them here. I like that they got whooped a little bit. I mean, I can't imagine that you have one of the that you have Dak and Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Fields.
How about Dak and Brock Purdy?
Right. That's the one I was hoping you weren't going to ask because Purdy with the bad matchup versus Baltimore, and then you have Dak with the, you have a little shine that's come off there. That's a true coin flip. I wouldn't be able to go away from Brock Purdy because the floor and the ceiling is there. Whereas Dak, we saw what the floor is. The floor is you lose, right? Yeah. 7 points against. But at least if Brock Purdy has a bad game, it's 17 fantasy points?
Sure. Well, and I think what's really neat about bringing Purdy into this conversation is that it goes back to what you've already mentioned, and it really touches on that we're at week 16 in this journey back. What we thought about these players when we drafted them feels so remote. It feels so distant. And hopefully when you look at Brock Purdy, you look at him the way we've been looking at Patrick Mahomes. And in fact, if someone said, I'm starting Brock Purdy over Patrick Mahomes, I would say, I'm not going to talk you out of that because he's been that consistent. And Baltimore in the rain against the Rams didn't exactly slow down Matthew Stafford a few weeks ago. So I just don't know. The movable object has been movable and the irresistible force has not been resisted. That San Francisco-Baltimore game. And I won't be shocked if Lamar Jackson, I'm not saying to bench Lamar Jackson, but if someone said Lamar or Purdy, I almost would want to come down to like the scoring system and what bonuses there are for different accomplishments. But I could see the Ravens getting humbled on Christmas night.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's a Super Bowl preview, right? Like that's if the favorites prevail. And, this is the excuse. We'll take this moment right here to tell people try to play in a 2-quarterback league because these things don't happen in 2-quarterback leagues. You very rarely have 2 guys you feel great about. Yeah, there is, you could have had Brock Purdy, Lamar Jackson, and Trevor Lawrence on one team somehow, some way. That could have happened. But yeah, so these are impossible decisions. They probably won't be the reason actually, you know what? I take that back. No, how many fantasy games you lose by less than a point, right?
Yeah, I think they are. That's the whole thing, right?
But they're not like because the result is wrong, right? One of them is the right answer, one of them is the wrong answer. But there's no process here. You can put it up on the board and list the pros and the cons. Go ahead, Sig. You want to jump in there? You said.
No.
Oh, okay.
I just think this is it. No, I mean, I'm excited to jump in just to say the reality is, and this goes back to what I was saying about wanting to make things make sense and say the reason I lost or the reason I won is because of me, because of something I decided. But the reality is the margin of victory in some of our playoff matchups really will be within the range of the difference between these options. We saw it just last week with the outcomes with some of these quarterbacks. And I want to double endorse what you said about 2-quarterback superflex, because the intrigue about 2-quarterback superflex this week, Alan, there's like 20 quarterbacks that you feel okay about.
I'm starting Mason Rudolph, dude. I have a league where I have to start Mason Rudolph. Like, he's in my lineup right now.
Yeah. You know, I got to tell this story because it just happened earlier on our preview show. Because I figured out that whiskey and Trubisky rhyme, I had to rewrite Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer this morning, and I sang it. I mean, I promised everybody I wouldn't sing again.
One more time, baby?
No. Well, just know that, it was then foggy December 23rd. Mike Tomlin came to say, Rudolph, I've been drinking whiskey. You look better than Mitch Trubisky. Anyway, it's about the crappy Steelers quarterbacks, because Steelers fans know, Maddox and Hanratty and, and Dixon and Bubby. Anyway, it's good. It's great. It's a great twist to have Mason Rudolph back right before Christmas. It's a terrible twist for Steelers fans to have gone through multiple times wanting to see any quarterback but Mason Rudolph, and then finally coming around to, can we see Mason Rudolph? Maybe. It's terrible. It's a terrible journey. Go ahead.
A lot of parallels between Jets and Steelers right now, right? With the quarterback situation. I mean, the Jets is definitely worse in my judgment, at least, but I guess it's all perspective. It's only worse because I'm on this side of the fence, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, the parallel is it's like this black hole. Like, the offense is like a black hole, and if you throw resources at it, it just gets bigger. It just eats the resource. The resources just feed it, right? Here's the number 2 overall pick. Here's Aaron Rodgers trade and con. Here's Kenny Pickett. And it threatens to engulf the whole season, and it does. And it's why I say quarterback wins are real. Quarterback wins are a real stat.
Yeah, this happened in a dynasty league of mine where I had the sickest team I drafted. It was a startup. Aaron Rodgers was my QB2. I didn't even draft another quarterback because I built the middle depth of my team, the other positions. Rodgers goes down. Now the black hole opens up, right? So what do? Somebody wants out of Bryce Young. I give him my next year's first round rookie pick. They give me Bryce Young. Bryce Young, not even startable, right? He's getting 7 points. I have guys that are, getting double-digit wide receivers. So I take Bryce Young and I turn him into Austin Eckler, right? So now the hole's even bigger. Not only do I have a non-startable asset, I have someone that's not even tradable in the offseason. So I started with Aaron Rodgers, turned it into Bryce Young, and at least Bryce Young would have been a trade asset during the offseason. So feeding that black hole, it just reminded me of my own team that I've destroyed.
Right. I turned a used car into a red paper clip. So... I like to say is, the saying, a fool and his money are soon parted. I'm the fool. I'm the person from that saying, actually. So
it's chasing a bet, right? It's like, all right. Yeah. It's chasing a bet.
Sunken costs, like they say, absolute good money after bad money, and so on and so forth. All these sayings, all these cliches, they are cliches because we repeat them. They come to mind because language gives us a mirror. And that's why we like to hang out and talk. Yeah. It is a great gift. And, well, folks, if you're still paying attention to fantasy football, if you're listening this far into a fantasy football podcast, if you have a fantasy football team alive, as I say 1,000 times a week at this time of year, just trust your gut, trust your intuition, and we'll give you some reasons that you can make sense out of why your gut's telling you that. But it's your team. That's why you play fantasy football.
Yeah. Hey, Sig, do you play in any postseason leagues too? Because people still need people still need to pay attention to football guys and your podcast with Cecil and the couch because you guys do a great job of really getting into the postseason stuff. And for those who have never played in those leagues, there's a lot of great softwares that do it. You can keep it by hand, but even this is not a sponsored plug, but fantasypostseason.com is literally a software made for this. Again, non-plug, I love them so much that I'm mentioning them. And you could set up a league and do a draft with just the players that are in the playoffs. You get 7 friends together because you want to do a 2-quarterback league, right? And there's 14 teams, and then just, you set it and forget it draft, right? You put in the players, and as they get eliminated, The idea is that you just lose their points. There's no waivers or this, so it's
Right,
another
right.
way to stay engaged.
Oh, totally. And playoff fantasy leagues hit me right in the nostalgia feels because, like you said, you can still score them by hand. It's a smaller league because, let's face it, a regular season long league with 8 or even 10 people can be a little tiresome as far as the lack of depth necessary. It becomes more random. Everyone has a good team. But in the playoff fantasy football, 6 teams or 8 teams is just right. You can even do it over lunch. You could actually have the draft in person over lunch, especially if you're in a work league. And it combines your prognostication of the players and your prognostication of the team's fates with the fantasy. It's great. Absolutely.
Yeah, you want to, in those leagues, the strategy is to find players who you think will play 3 and 4 games,
right,
maybe as a better tiebreaker over a skill player like a DeAndre Hopkins. I remember in the past was always on a team that was projected to go out in the first round, and then it would be some marginal wide receiver who was on a good team. So those are the decisions you make. Yeah.
No, it's great. I mean, I do my playoff strategy and rankings before the wild card round. I highly recommend it, folks. It's really fun. Yep. Okay. God, high school basketball referee. There's so many places I could go there. Well, you gotta wear your referee shirt for like a segment, man. You got to play off of that visual because I could see it too. I could see. Let me ask you this: what is your resting face? Do your resting face as a referee for me.
I smile when I referee. I look like I'm because I look like I'm having a good time. Yeah, everyone always says they look like you're having a good time. I said I am. And then it's. I mean, this is my way of staying connected to basketball because I can't play anymore. Not that I was ever any good or like that, but I used to play, and I can't even play pickup anymore. I'm out there with these great athletes, these high school varsity athletes flying through the air, having a good time. And when the coach is when they yell at me, first thing I say is, just talk to me. You can talk to me. You don't have to yell at me. Well, this play that play. Just tell me. Just talk to me. Most people don't
Does it
even
work? Can you actually calm them down? Can you actually pull them out of like their emotional brain during the game?
Yes. Not 100% of the time. Everyone's different. But at the same time, it's just like like anyone else. Like when you say this all the time in your podcast, people just want to be heard, right?
Yeah.
When they think you're listening to them and you say, okay, coach, I understand. Or if they say, that guy fouled my player over there, I would say, what number? So now it's like I'm listening to him. What number was it? Okay, I'll look for it. There's rapid responses that they're in a book. I study them that you can do that are de-escalators. The worst thing you can say to someone is calm down, right? You never want to say that to someone.
But it's what you actually are thinking. Okay, no, that's good. I'm putting that on a little yellow sticky note in my brain. Like, just calm down. Just X that one.
Yeah, don't say that.
Vocabulary. No, this is great. This is vital. Human psychology and interpersonal relations to me is one of the most mysterious things. And maybe I'm just revealing more about myself than some truth of the universe. But it's human psychology can be very mysterious. And there are times in the love of my life, Kate, my wife and I, sometimes she comes at stuff like a classic behaviorist. Like the theory of mind that we're like a computer and. From a philosophical perspective, like determinism, and sometimes our behavior does adhere to seemingly simple principles enough that you can tell yourself, yeah, it is like a math that you can eventually crack or figure out. But then other times, no, human beings can be elusive. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just listening to you. I'm enjoying it. I forget for a minute that I'm on your podcast because I listened all the time in religion. I was like, oh wait, I'm listening. I'm like nodding. This is how I listen when I'm listening to you. Like I'm nodding along. So it's like a song.
So go back to being a referee. So tell me on that note about human behavior being unpredictable. Tell me like the craziest thing that's happened in one of your games, like something that sticks out as memorable because it was just seemed to be like a remarkable, surprising, unique event.
Yeah, so the most difficult games to referee are, believe it or not, is when you have partners that aren't like referee partners that aren't on the same level as you, or and it doesn't mean like I'm higher or lower. Just thinking about the game, there's certain referees that come out there and just want to call, every touch foul, and those are called game interrupters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just because it was a travel, it had no advantage or disadvantage. So my philosophy is just referee the advantage or disadvantage, not necessarily the spirit of the game, not the letter of the law. Not everybody thinks that. Somebody who says, oh, you need the rule. This is what the rule says. So those type of inconsistencies can aggravate coaches, which then, and remember, coaches and on the high school level, if they get a technical foul, they have to sit down. They can no longer coach from the
Right.
standing position. If they get a second technical foul, they get I think it's a $400 or $500 fine, and they have to go to anger management classes. So
Wow.
you have to be, you
So
don't want.
you're like an actor of the state, basically. You kind of have a law enforcement power.
Yeah, and I don't want to do that to anybody. I don't want to take money out of anyone's pocket. So
Right.
I don't try not to give a technical foul. So if a coach is acting unsporting, Sigmund, what I'll say to them is saying, "Okay, coach, I've heard you. I think we're good here. Like that's enough.
Yeah.
Like that's the first warning shot." But some of them, they just want to scream. And even in the pregame huddle, what I'll say to them is, after the kids leave, I'd say, Coach 1 and Coach 2, I said, let us right here be the example of healthy communication tonight. That's what I tell them. I said, and if there's a problem, just don't scream across the court. When we come around, talk to us, because anything else is unsporting, and then we have to administer technical fouls. So that's it. You just tell them what's going on.
That's great. So what's something crazy that's happened in a game that you
refereed? A coach coming on the I've had a coach get in my face and literally say, "I'm going to kill you, MF."
Oh.
So I mean, yeah, that's the crazy. And you have to stand there like
your head. So what goes through your mind? So have you been in subsequent games with that coach?
Yes, and they almost pretend like it didn't happen. I'm like,
okay,
dude, you threatened my life. Like, and now all of a sudden, like, you're pretending it didn't happen. I'm glad, because I don't want to ever address it again. It's too uncomfortable. But yeah, I'll admit I was scared. Right? This was a scary looking dude. But you have to pretend you're not scared, but you're shocked.
Have you ever discussed it? Have you all ever discussed it?
With the other with the coach?
Yeah.
No.
He acknowledged it. No. So
no. We pretend it didn't happen.
I mean, I grew up as a child of alcoholics, so that's probably be my coping mechanism. But I don't know if it's the best coping mechanism.
Oh, it's definitely not. It's too, but it's like, this was a coach that I don't think he was interested in communicating. And I always say to myself, it wasn't something that with me. There's something else going on in his world.
And that's applicable in 100% of the circumstances of things going sideways in life, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the hard thing. Taking it back to parenting is, when you've been on both sides of the parenting equation, which I have a lot of negative associations with being on both sides of it, you at least see the perspective of there's reasons that your parents were the way that they were. There were things that they weren't under their control. You get into like generational trauma, basically, and that's why we all just try to do a little bit better. And I think it's beautiful. I think that I mean, Alan, there's a whole life philosophy in some of the things that you say, and I love that you're doing it with a smile to say, like, hey, let's be an example of something we strive for tonight.
Yep. Yeah. I just wanted the one other thing, because I know we're rounding out. The biggest mistake I've ever made was in a playoff game, Sigmund Bloom. I put a men's ball into a women's game. So they're small. The women's ball is smaller.
Sure.
That's total incompetence on my part, right?
How long did it take them to figure it out?
This girl, this fantastic player, she comes up, rips a three, nets it, right? And just looks at me. She goes, "That's just so you know, it's a men's ball." So I stop the game around the next dead ball, and I take the ball, and I pretend that I'm like, there's something wet on the ball. I said, "Give me another ball." But my assigner was there. He knows what I did. He goes, "Just so you know, I know what you did." So at least I didn't make a thing of it. But yeah, that's complete incompetence to put the wrong ball in play.
Oh, that's why I wouldn't be the referee, because I'd be afraid of making that mistake. I'm really on the couch if I start breaking myself down. But I want to end on a positive note, and you've given us so many, Alan. And I'd love I'm so glad we delved into this referee thing, because I love that you have an internally consistent philosophy about the values that you want to portray and project through how you're going to conduct yourself, and you're explicit and you're direct with the coaches, and you apply things you understand about human psychology that are universal in how you go about that. And what's positive about it is, like you said, it's the higher self. Is you're appealing to the higher self, right? And isn't that, as we get to the holiday season, whatever your denomination, whatever you believe or don't believe, it's a winter festival, and it's about rebirth that comes in spring. And even when things are the darkest or the coldest, the shortest days, there are better days to come. There's something brighter inside of all of us, and we can even take a role in each other's lives to help bring that about, at least temporarily, at least for a moment, at least for the season. And go ahead.
No, I'm enjoying
Oh
this. You
yeah,
kidding
no,
me?
I
There's
didn't know
no
if you
go
were
ahead.
going to interject. And so yeah,
No.
I just want to end on that note as we will see you all. I know we'll do a recap, but really this is the last moment we're going to have together. And I
May
hope
I
that
ask you a question?
yeah, go ahead.
All
Mhm.
right. After the 20 plus years you're doing this, 18 years, 20 years of doing
Right.
this stuff, what are you enjoying it the same? And it's okay. You don't have to say, is it different? Like what I still, every time I think the
Mhm.
show is better than it's ever been. I've been listening pretty close to since the beginning when you guys were
Yeah.
doing this is like when a podcast, no one knew what a podcast was. So I think,
Sure.
but I'm just curious, what's going on internally inside your head? Does it
Wow.
need a phase? Do you feel like it needs something or them? Because, like I said, my perception, the audience, and I'm a fan first before I'm,
Yeah.
a co-analyst of yours. I think it sounds fantastic.
Well, thank you for that because I need it. I need the
Truth.
approval. I need the approval. Um, I mean, there's a lot of layers to answer the question that you're asking. But I will say that overall, I feel really good because I think that in so much as the show represents the connection I have with the people who are our loyal people, the energy that's flowing there is positive and continues to be positive. Now, what happens as we try to expand the YouTube channel and new people encounter us that maybe have different expectations? What happens I don't really spend too much time thinking about that. Thankfully, because overall people are very positive in the chat room and even when people want to tell me something that I did wrong, they always say, "Oh, I love what you do." People are incredibly gracious in our community. But I will say that the change I have most observed in myself is at the beginning, I was really about like trying to crack the code. Like I was going to figure out how to do this better than anybody else. I was going to pour over everything. I was going to study everything. And I was really going to figure out some sort of Rosetta Stone. And the more I did it, the more I became clear to me that it was just not knowable. The outcomes are inherently, we got back to the topic of randomness here. And not that I don't want to still put the work in and help and be right more than I'm wrong. And even for my own teams, I'm still very emotionally invested in them when it comes right down to it. But what I appreciate and what really powers me doing this show is knowing that a handful of people, even just like the person I'm talking to right now, like you, are opening themselves up, opening up their consciousness for me to be there. Like I joked back in the day, I was just like, I'm in your head. I'm in your head right now. That's like the thing, like, oh, I'm in your head. But really you're saying like, no, come into my head. And that's a great privilege. And that's something that I don't want to squander if people are going to give me that opportunity. And it's more about normalcy and keeping each other company and grounding each other back in our humanity. Again, back to that striving for a higher self. So it's been really easy to allow this show to morphing from we're going to give the best advice and have the best football knowledge to hopefully just keeping people company in a human way, because that there seems to be a shortage of that these days.
Voila.
Yeah,
Well said. Well, you can get football content anywhere. People choose to come to you, Sigmund Bloom, because like you said, they feel connected. They, I think like, I know what you're saying. Guys that have been doing it as long as you have, it's a whole new world with YouTube and the algorithm. By the way, cross out the word algorithm. Anyone that tries to tell you algorithm, yes, there's certain things you could do, but just the word algorithm is really just another word for the audience, and good content's going to win. And
I hope so.
sure. Yes, sure. Thumb. Go ahead, Sigmund Bloom.
No, I'm not trying to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
really.
of course, you do need catchy thumbnails and titles that, there are titles that work better than others, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you can get them in the door with curb appeal. But if you go in there and the wall's cracked and there's cat litter on the floor and the house and the content isn't good, people are going to walk right out. So those vanity metrics like views, sure, those will be high, but are people really invested? Are they going to take the next step? Are they going to sign up for Football Guys? Are they going to follow Sigmund Bloom on X? Are they going to really engage with you and really have that deeper connection? And I know because I do with you. I've been following you forever with this stuff. And, like I said, that's what I think. You could do all these little tricks, but at the end of the day, good content, genuine content, sincere content, which you do, is always going to win in the end. Always.
Well, it all depends on how we define win. And I think that boy, we're really opening it up here because we went past an hour, and I guess all the rules are we really are off the rails. But I'll just wrap it up like
I could
this
do
and
3
say,
more hours with you. You know what I'm
oh
saying?
yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I understand though.
Now that we're out in this territory, I'll wrap it up like this and say that, I hope good content wins out or quality wins out. But I know that we can look out today in the year 2023 in our lives and see lots of examples where that's not what's happening. And it feels like the world, or the world of people at least, is wicked or tainted in a way. And it gets back to all of the spiritual traditions and all of the thought that has gone into how human beings handle being, the human condition, and the choices that we make. And that is something that we continue to hold, that is ours and ours alone. And I guess it's just the nature of where we are on the calendar, Alan. And I think that that's what this season stands for. No matter what religious spin you want to put on it, is making a wish for ourselves to maybe be better in the future. And I know that having everybody to be here for me to have, I mean, I promise you folks, you give me more than I give you. And that's why I think I always want to focus on the humanity, because anybody can give you good football advice, but being a human being seems to get harder and harder. So let's all keep trying to do that together. And thank you, Alan, because every time we get together, it's always inspiring. Thank you, everybody. Have a great holiday season with the people that you care about. We care about you because you're so classy.